ho! You thought that the Space Marines were the only line of defense for the Imperium of mankind? Ha! I laugh at your thoughts. I lost my train of thought. Yay, brilliant, excellent idea, Sam. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Have a Good One. As you might have noticed from the past few weeks, I've been talking a lot about Warhammer, been talking a lot about Space Marines, and I thought, hey, you know, this is kind of a good time to start moving on with our lives, because there's a lot more in the Warhammer 40k universe than just specimens, despite what Games Workshop would insist it being. So, we're going to be talking about another, the biggest force in the Imperium of mankind, known as the Imperial Guard. Now, how exactly are Space Marines different from the Imperial Guard, and how are they similar? Well, the similarity is that they both serve the Imperium of mankind, which is actually quite useful for us, because it means that I don't need to explain any of the backstory or lore for the Imperial Guard, because theirs is basically the same as the Space Marines. So, I can get back straight into the action of it all. So the Imperial Guard is basically the armies of humans. They are the humans of the world. They are just regular dudes, and we love the Imperial Guard. Full disclosure here, I don't actually play Warhammer. I played the video games. I played Dawn of War. And actually, I'm currently on the Imperial Guard campaign. I've played through as Eldar and Orcs so far, which we'll get into later on, and now I'm up to Imperial Guard, and we really love the Imperial Guard. They are great. If I were to ever play Warhammer, and I were to play an Imperium of Man faction, I'd probably pick the Imperial Guard, because they're so admirable because of just how brave they are. Now here's the thing, alright? Space Marines have been genetically modified to not feel fear, which means, ironically, that a Space Marine can't be brave. They just physically can't be brave, because they can't feel fear. You have to be able to experience fear in order to be brave, and that's exactly what the Imperial Guard are. They are regular dudes. They are like the common human, right? They absolutely feel fear, and a lot of them are pretty darn scared of all of the Chaos Demons, and all of the Chaos Space Marines, and all of the Xenos all over the place that all want to kill them, but they fight to their last every single time. They fight to their last. They are super brave. They are super admirable. And granted, the threat of being killed if they don't serve might affect that somewhat. But they still fight to their last breath. Most of the time. There are obviously some traitor Imperial Guards, but we won't be looking into them for this time. In case you haven't noticed, well, actually, if you look up different Imperial Guard regiments, which is like, that's kind of how the Imperial Guard is divided into sub-factions. You know how with Space Marines they had chapters? Yeah, the Imperial Guard have different regiments, and there's a lot. There's a lot of them. Now, from a gameplay perspective, the whole deal with the Imperial Guard is that your average guardsman is probably the weakest standard unit out of any faction in the game, because they're just a normal human with a lasgun, which, by the way, lasgun is this rifle that shoots lasers. It has perfect accuracy, so it'll pretty much end up exactly where you aim. It doesn't really run out of ammo very easily, and it's powerful enough to blow limbs off of people. And these weapons that are standard issue for Imperial Guardsmen are so useless from the perspective of big Warhammer battles that they are jokingly referred to as flashlights. Something that can blow limbs off of people is referred to as flashlights because of how comparatively weak it is. Yeah, that's quite a bit. But yeah, the thing with the Imperial Guard is they're not very strong, but they have a lot of numbers. Like, it's not unheard of that you can amass an army of, like, I don't know, like 1 billion people on a planet. Like, there's a lot. There's a lot of Imperial Guardsmen, and they also have very good artillery. They got good tanks, they've got orbital bombardments, they've got, you know, bunch of different stuff like that. And they typically rely on their artillery and overwhelming numbers in order to win, which can be quite successful. Also, the other cool thing about the Imperial Guard is that a lot of them are inspired by different, they have like a bit of like a World War aesthetic. They're based on, a lot of them are based off of different real-life armies as far as their uniforms are concerned. So that's always really cool. So yeah. Anyway, let's get into probably the most well-known Imperial Guardsman regiment out of all of them, the Acadian Shock Troopers, or the Acadian Shock Troops. These guys are probably the most well-known. If you ever see a picture of an Imperial Guardsman, it'll probably be Acadian. And that's because the Acadians are actually kinda, like, extremely good at what they do. Like, they're considered to be, like, the most elite out of all the Imperial Guardsmen regiments. They are highly disciplined and constructed, or not constructed, they are conscripted in large numbers from the fortress world of Acadia, as you would probably expect. Rest in peace. And it stands as the preeminent bastion of the Imperium of Man in the fight against the Emperor's ancient archenemy, Chaos. Now, the thing about Acadia is that it was kind of placed pretty unfortunately. It stands in the edge of the Eye of Terror. Now, I don't think I explained what the Eye of Terror is in either of the last 2 episodes, so I'll go into that right now. So, the Eye of Terror is basically this this black hole or a wormhole that leads to the warp. And it is essentially the biggest chaos portal in the galaxy, which was ultimately created by the Eldar. We'll get into that more once we get into the Eldar more. But, yeah, so because of that, Acadia is kind of just constantly assaulted by chaos and chaos demons and chaos space marines and all of that kind of stuff, which means if they wanted the planet and their people to survive, they would need to, well, they'd need to be very good at fighting off chaos. And so they did. For 10,000 standard years, Acadia had endured the constant assaults of the forces of chaos from within the Eye, and has remained completely unbowed and unconquered. Chaos have tried for 10,000 years to take over Acadia, but have failed every single time. And obviously, because they've been able to hold off chaos for 10,000 years, the guardsmen of this planet are known to possess unsurpassed discipline and skill. And the regiments stand as examples to the rest of the Guard and mankind. The Acadians committed 612 shock troop regiments, 486 companies of Acadian Katachin, and 36 regional commands of the Acadian Youth Army in the defense of their homeworld and its surrounding systems. The Ward of Acadia was awarded to 912 Acadian officers in 3 weeks, while 19 Katachin companies, which are kind of like... Katachin companies or Katachin squads are kind of like your elite guardsmen. They are essentially better disciplined, more skilled, and better equipped than your average guardsman. So yeah, they're kind of like your... not really super soldiers, because I'd say Space Marines are probably closer to your super soldiers, but they're your elite guardsmen, more or less. Yeah, they were commended for conspicuous gallantry, and the Order of Oleanus Pius was awarded for the first time in 7 centuries to the Acadian Youth Army. Now, the Acadians believe that discipline is the single most important factor in the operation of any army. While there are those who justifiably disagree with this position, it has nonetheless served the Acadians well for millennia, and countless imperial victories can be attributed to the effort and determination of the sons and daughters of Acadia. Now, what ended up happening to Acadia? Well, eventually, after 10,000 years of just not being able to win, this one Space Marine, I guess you could say Chapter Master, or War Master maybe, known as Abaddon the Despoiler, had a little bit of a sukla, and so he decided to throw a planet or a space station at Acadia and ended up destroying it. Every single person on Acadia was killed at the time, which is why Acadia is such a tragedy nowadays. But it's also where we get the meme that Acadia fell before the Guard did. No, wait. The meme goes that Acadia broke before the Guard did. Like, we're talking, the Imperial Guard was so determined, they were so stubborn, so resilient, that the freaking planet had to get destroyed, and they still didn't give up. And, they're still not done fighting either, because even though the planet was destroyed, there were a lot of Acadian troopers that had traveled to other planets during the time. And so because of that, they don't actually have... there are still plenty of Acadians out there. So yeah, it's a tragedy, but it's still quite the inspiring story to all of humanity. Yeah, so the Acadians are considered to be the most elite of the regiments. They are a militaristic society where literally everyone serves. And actually, here's another thing. Because they have been so close... Yeah, so men, women, and even children, as mentioned before with the youth group, all serve Acadia. And the other thing is that because they are so close to the Eye of Terror, they're just constantly bombarded by chaos energies. And because of that, they actually have now got a little bit of chaos energy in them, which is shown by Acadians all having purple eyes, which is obviously quite unusual. But, interestingly enough, the Inquisition, which is all about, you know, killing heretics and all that, they actually let the Acadians go about their business, even though they basically have chaos energies in them. They don't actually kill them, they just let them be. I guess because they're a lot more useful to them when they're, you know, alive and serving. Because otherwise they would have to kill all of them. Not to mention the Acadians also have amazing training, weapons, gear, and they're the poster boys of the Guard. As I'd said before, if you look up a picture of an Imperial Guardsman, the pictures are probably going to be of Acadians. And a squad of Acadians can legit take down a Chaos Space Marine with very little trouble. Like, these dudes are badass. But they all have they all deal with the grief of their planet having gotten blown to Kingdom Come. Yeesh. Next up, we have the Katachin Jungle Fighters, or maybe it's Katachan Jungle Fighters. Actually, yeah, the Katachan Jungle Fighters, which look very similar to how, you know, like Rambo, like John Rambo and Dutch from Predator dress. It's like they're jungle fighters, and the reason behind them is that they're recruited. Katachan jungle fighters are recruited from the jungle death world of Katachan. And for those of you who are wondering, hey, what's a death world? It's basically a planet that is considered to be just inhospitable and people just will die there. These dudes are on a planet. These dudes live on a planet that is supposed to be like impossible to survive, but they're managing to make it work. They have the well-deserved reputation of being the deadliest practitioners of jungle warfare in the galaxy. Their homeworld of Katachan is a place where natural selection ensures only the most deadly flora and fauna survive. Like these boys. They're extremely resourceful and uncompromising warriors. The natives of Katachan, recruited into the Imperial Guard, are deadly melee fighters with their specialized close combat blades or ambush tactics with their las carbines, which is a more powerful las gun, basically. In jungle terrain, they are unsurpassed by nearly any other mortal soldiers in the Imperium, with each Katachan fighter being worth 10 soldiers from any other regiment. Katachans believe that even the most suicidal of military engagements are nothing compared to spending a single day in the lethal jungles of their homeworld. This gun-ho enthusiasm is often mistaken for bravado by guardsmen from other regiments. The fact remains, however, that Katachan jungle fighters are the most uncomplaining, determined, and valorous soldiers of the Astra Militarum, which is the fancy term for Imperial Guard. Like the Adeptus Astartes is the fancy term for Space Marines. Whether assigned to basic garrison duties or a hopeless assault upon an impregnable forest, they are oofed. Yeah. The natives of Katachan are renowned for being both taller and more powerful than normal humans. Due to their heavily developed physiques, Katachans are sometimes referred to as baby ogrins by other Imperial Guardsmen, although saying this within earshot often results in serious injury. Now, for the record, ogrins are these, I guess you could say they're these kind of elite soldiers that are reminiscent of ogres. So they've got Shreks in their army as well, which is just even more useful as far as I'm concerned. Also, just to give a better idea as well, the Katachans have been, they have been able to, well, okay, so the planet of Katachan has been invaded quite a bit by many different xenos. They've been attacked by Tyranids, Dark Eldar, Chaos, all of that kind of stuff. And they've never been able to take over the planet because the Katachans are just too deadly. They're just too, like I said before, they're considered superhuman. They can even wield bolt guns, which, you know, are the weapons that Space Marines use. A single guardsman has been known to eliminate entire squads of Chaos Marines on many occasions. However, you probably won't live to the age of 5 because your world is literally classified as a death world, because screw you, I guess. And, as I'd mentioned before, said death world is constantly being attacked by Chaos, Tyranids, Dark Elder. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if the Necrons drop by at some point. But the Katachans have also had a really badass dude called Sly Marbo, who was like a huge threat to the Tyranids. However, there's been a time skip, so now he has sadly passed away. But yeah, the Ogrins are essentially, they're like a I don't want to say a subspecies of human because that sounds a bit ill. But they are known as abhuman mutant. Okay, the wiki says they're a subspecies of humanity. But they are known for, as you would probably expect, being brutally strong and completely loyal, but very limited intellectually. So yeah, they're usually recruited as being like shock troopers and that. They're good soldiers. They're good soldiers. But the question is being good men as well. But anyway, next we've got the Death Corps of Krieg, which, honestly, I'm kind of getting some, like, maybe like some, World War II era Germany style stuff. They're the ones known for wearing gas masks, the Death Corps of Krieg. It's given to all of the Imperial Guard regiments that originate from the devastated post-nuclear death world of Krieg, which has a lot of dangerous worlds around. Krieg was the site of a rebellion against the Imperium of Man over 1,500 years ago in the 40th millennium, and was bombarded with nuclear weapons, followed by 500 years of grinding warfare to purge the heretical rebels. After all those years of nuclear destruction and bitter trench warfare, World War I, Krieg, well actually, World War I crossed with World War II actually, nuclear destruction and trench warfare. But since then, Krieg was reduced to a scorched radioactive husk of a world composed of dust and mud, whose surviving people were forced to retreat into underground hive cities to survive the toxic planetary environment. The Death Corps of Krieg is a siege specialist regiment of the Imperial Guard, and the regiments raised on Krieg seek to repent for their former treachery against the Imperium by displaying just absolute undying loyalty, as well as a disturbing disregard for their own lives in combat. These dudes are very suicidal. They excel at wars of attrition and the defense of static strongpoints. Trained amongst the irradiated ruins of long-dead cities, equipped for the most hostile environments, and raised on sermons of self-sacrifice and penitence, the Krieg regiments have commonly been deployed, often at their own request, to some of the deadliest war zones. The Krieg have gained a reputation for their grim attitude and uncompromising nature. Disdainful of retreat or surrender, and fighting without any fear of death, the soldiers of Krieg seem to have no regard for their own lives. Indeed, the prevailing attitude amongst the Krieg is that they are little more than weapons for the Emperor's will, faceless and infinitely replaceable behind their masks, which make it kind of hard to identify them. Which, truth be told, they kind of are at this point. And they hold self-sacrifice as the highest of ideals. The Death Corps of Krieg is arguably the strongest regiment. They can wage war successfully under any conditions, even those that would cripple other regiments. And Well, to be fair, actually, their gas masks mean that they can actually survive just fine in normally, you know, unlivable areas. But the other thing is that it's also to hide just how young a lot of the soldiers are. Yeah. And despite what the memes will have you think, a deathcore soldier will kill you and everyone around you without breaking a sweat. They also have very strong artillery themselves. Also, because of their philosophy of like penance and self-sacrifice, they are bar none the most loyal of all guardsmen regiments. I'm pretty sure there have been like the fewest number of traders from Krieg, which is good, because could you imagine how dangerous chaos would be then? They are vat-grown soldiers, literally made for war, so they're not too different from Space Marines, I guess, which are born and bred from a gene seed of a Primarch. They're also one of, if not the largest regiment. They can make the Iron Warriors, a Chaos Space Marine faction, sweat with how good they are at siege warfare, and they literally do not accept defeat. Except for the times that they do, obviously. But the problem with Krieg is that most regiments don't actually want to work with them, because they are a little bit too self-sacrificing, which isn't always the best idea strategically. Anyway, next up we have the Armageddon Steel Legion. They fight as mechanized infantry alongside Chimera armored personnel carriers in defense of the strategically located Imperial hive world of Armageddon and its surrounding star systems. Armageddon was a planet blighted and poisoned by millennia of heavy industrial output, though it was also a major manufacturing center. In the late 41st century, Armageddon became a constant battleground between the Imperial Guard Steel Legion regiments and the countless orc hordes of the warlord Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka. Now, the Steel Legion is actually also kind of reminiscent of World War II soldiers. They have so many tanks. Matter of fact, armored vehicle combat in general is their specialty. They are particularly effective against orcs and chaos, at least in the orcs case because they've been fighting orcs for so long. Chaos Space Marines are referred to as speed bumps to them, and they are excellent at siege warfare, defending their homeworld of Armageddon through 3 of the largest wars in recent 40k lore. But their homeworld has basically become a death world, and as I'd mentioned before, the planet is also subject to frequent wargs, which, in case you don't know, is essentially a large organized army of orcs, which can be pretty darn dangerous. Also, due to the massive chaos problem, the Inquisition has it out for Armageddon, and if not for the Space Wolves, Armageddon might not exactly be whole. Next up, we're going to get into some of the more specialized Imperial Guardsmen, like the Elysian Drop Troops. The Elysian Drop Troops are the airborne assault infantry regiments of the Imperial Guard and are recruited from the Verdant world of Elysia, 30 light years from the hive world of Armageddon. Rare within the Imperial Guard as a whole, drop infantry regiments like the Elysians are a potent strategic asset which many generals are eager to obtain, and Elysia produces a considerable quantity of such regiments, whose skills are employed across the galaxy. The Elysian drop troop regiments make extensive use of aircraft and elite soldiers plunging from the skies directly into battle. These regiments' true advantage lies in their speed, unpredictability, and the unrivaled ability to attack anywhere on the battle at any time. Plus, they get bonus points for coolness because they actually use jetpacks. Which you would think in a sci-fi world, everyone would be using them, honestly. Next up, we've got the Tallahan Desert Raiders, which, as you would probably expect, are inspired by desert-based soldier fighting. Even to the point where they've got, you know, they're wearing turbans, and they have some weapons that seem to be at least partly inspired by Middle Eastern weaponry. Honestly, the only one that I can really think of isn't actually even a proper weapon. Not even a real one, but it's just the Shanahanahanaha from TF2, which I'm pretty sure is based off a similar thing. Anyway, the Tallahan Desert Raiders are the regiments of the Imperial Guard raised from the desert world of Tatooine, Tallahan, who are highly skilled at desert and mobile armored warfare. The Desert Raiders are mobile guerrilla fighters, evasive and opportunistic. They are especially known for their lightning-quick sentinels, which are kind of like, I guess, thinking about it like best way possible, they're kind of like ATSTs from Star Wars, as far as design goes. They're like these walkers that walk on two legs, but they're quite good anti-vehicle weaponry, or vehicles, I guess. So yeah, they've got very quick sentinels and hard-hitting tank squadrons, and are masters of hit-and-run mobile warfare. Kinda like the White Scars, actually. They love to strike a killing blow at the heart of an enemy formation before returning to their own lines, prepared to pounce once more. The people of Tallahan are extremely resourceful and pragmatic. They are patient, determined, and utterly ferocious in pursuit of their enemies. Tallahan are all accomplished riders, and often will use riding mounts to move from battle to battle, dismounting only when they're close to the enemy and wish to employ stealth. Once the enemy is sighted, the Tallahan will stalk their enemy closely, relying on their practiced marksmanship and lightning quick curved combat knives to achieve victory. So next up, we've got the Mordian Iron Guard, which, in my opinion, are probably some of the coolest looking Imperial Guardsmen. Now, I'm pretty darn sure that these guys' designs, their outfits, are supposed to be inspired by... okay, I'm not sure whether it's meant to be like American Revolution era soldiers or Napoleonic Wars. I think they're based off like this, the outfits of like the Napoleonic Wars era France, I think. Regardless, I think these guys are definitely the coolest designed out of all the guardsmen. They are the superbly drilled and accoutred regiments of the Imperial Guard that hail from the hive world of Mordian, or Mordia, I guess. This bleak world is tidally locked with its sun, which essentially means that one side of the planet is just going to be perpetually dark, while the other is just constantly daytime, leaving it a scorched and lifeless wasteland. As such, all human settlements on Mordia are located on the world's dark side, and the planet has well earned its moniker as the world of eternal night. The people of Mordian are grim and dour by nature, respecting only discipline and duty. Their regiments are fiercely loyal to their cause, the prosecution of the Emperor's enemies. In battle, these highly disciplined soldiers present perfectly formed ranks of troops to the enemy, unleashing precisely timed volleys of lasfire from behind a hedge of bayonet points. Some enemies of the Emperor have been misled by the Mordians' very fancy uniforms to believe that they were facing amateurs or just ceremonial troops, only to find the bright uniforms contain tough, steely-eyed, and implacable warriors of the Imperium. These dudes are tough as nails and still have some mad drip, not gonna lie. So next up, we've got the Valhalla Ice Warriors, which I'm sure you guys can probably figure out where that naming scheme came from. But obviously they are inspired by kind of Russian Finnish soldier designs. You know the deal. Long coats. I don't know what the actual name of the hat is, but like, you know, the Russian hat. And yeah, they're basically the same design as any soldier in like a predominantly cold European country, but mostly Russia and Finland. The Valhalla Ice Warriors are the regiments of the Imperial Guard which hail from the frozen and desolate ice world of Valhalla. The Valhalla Ice Warriors have a long and glorious history of victories against the orcs and other enemies of the Imperium. Famed as some of the toughest regiments ever employed by the Imperial Guard, because you kinda have to be to survive on a frozen wasteland planet. These grim and tenacious troops never retreat and refuse to surrender. They're particularly successful at cold weather combat, as you would expect, and are often used by the Imperium when a campaign of attrition must be fought on an ice world that's similar in climate to their frigid homeworld, or when an operation involves combat against orcs. These guys are, well, they're really good against orcs. Next up, we have the Vostroian Firstborn. And now, the Vostroian Firstborn, these guys actually also have some really mad drip. It kind of looks like they're also inspired by Russian soldier designs. There's even one picture here of one dude that's got a gas mask as well, which is pretty dope. But the Vostroian Firstborn are the regiments of the Imperial Guard that originate from the industrial hive world of Vostroia. These regiments have served the Emperor for countless centuries, though in truth, they fight to absolve themselves of a terrible shame incurred by their ancestors over 10 millennia ago, when during the dark days of the Horus heresy, Vostroia failed in its duty to the Emperor of mankind. When the galaxy was consumed in war and anarchy, the Emperor commanded that worlds still loyal to the Imperium send forth fighting men to help defend it against the War Master Horus and his traitor legions. Now, Vostroia actually refused, arguing that it could better serve the Imperium by continuing to devote all its efforts to the manufacture of weapons for the Emperor's armies, and that to give up so much of its populace to become warriors for the Imperial army would render it incapable of producing those weapons in sufficient quantities. The Vostroians' refusal to provide soldiers was met with uncommon mercy by the Imperium once the heresy had ended, and the people of Vostroia have forever after sought to atone for their mistakes, promising to provide the firstborn son of every Vostroian family to the service of the Imperial Guard. So, it seems as though they're kind of going pretty far in the opposite direction now. So that was just a taste of all of the Imperial Guard regiments that are out there. But next week I can talk to you about the many, many more that are out there, because there are quite a few. So stay tuned for that, and hope you guys bear an extra week of this, and until then, Have a good one.